This next story just came out earlier this morning, and this comes from a staff member of Nathan Robinson's Current Affairs. And what the staff of Nathan's publication wanted to do was organize into a workers' co-op. So I'm going to read this letter real quick because Nathan Robinson has effectively taken the same stance as a Cenk Uygur, a Dave Portnoy, when it came time to follow through on a socialism. This may be hard to read for the viewers, but I'll read it out loud for y'all. We, the former staff and part-time staff, write to you with deep sadness and disappointment about recent events that have occurred at Current Affairs on August 8th. Editor-in-Chief Nathan J. Robinson, author of Why You Should Be a Socialist, unilaterally fired most of the workforce to avoid an organizational restructuring that would limit his personal power. Yes, we are fired by the editor-in-chief of a socialist magazine for trying to start a worker co-op. We all joined the Current Affairs at different times. The business manager was hired with the explicit instruction to help shepherd the magazine through the process of creating a more democratic workspace in alignment with our socialist values. The organizational restructuring reforms we did a full organizational survey and one-on-one interviews with editors and staff to try to find a consensus on a collective vision. Everyone's stated goal, including Nathan's, was to create a democratic workplace where all voices were equally valued. But when we finally got around to discussing organizational models during a Zoom meeting on August 7th, Nathan became agitated. He insisted in our attempt to set shared informal values, we were disregarding his vision for Current Affairs as published in the first issue. There was a palatable shift in his demeanor, and he behaved in a hostile manner throughout the rest of the conversation. The next morning, he started removing people from the company, Slack, and sent letters requesting resignations, eliminating positions, and in some cases, offering new honorary titles which would have no say in governance. In individual letters, Nathan claimed he had irreparably lost faith in our ability to work together, but less than 24 hours later, he sent follow-up emails retracting his statements and admitting that he simply did not want Current Affairs to be a democratic workplace. He believes in his guts. The magazine and media venture would have collectively creative is purely his, he wrote. This organization has been slowly heading for some sort of reckoning, which was going to have to be made clear once and for all what kind of authority I wanted to have over it. And I was in denial about the fact that the answer is I think I should be on top of the organizational chart with everyone else selected by and reporting to me. I let Current Affairs build up into sort of an egalitarian community of friends, while knowing in my heart that I still thought of it as my project which I should have control. We note darkly that he says egalitarian community of friends and not, of course, a workplace. Nathan overtures since the purge had been to reach out to repair friendships or hastily offer new ad hoc work. but he is fundamentally missing the point. He has effectively fired us for organizing for better work conditions. We are sad, aghast, betrayed, and of course angry to realize that this person we trusted has been lying to us for years. We, a small staff composed entirely of women and non-binary people, have faithfully worked to make Current Affairs the beautiful, engaging leftist magazine and podcast that it is. We have commissioned articles and illustrations, planned and produced a podcast, organized contracts and ensured swift payment for contributors, edited the vast majority of articles, conceived the amusements, created the social media and marketing, and done most of the work running Current Affairs. Nathan Robinson can write articles and give speeches, but when it comes to running an organization, he simply isn't up for the task. As he wrote in one of his emails, August 8th, I think you saw yesterday, ultimately I felt the Current Affairs was slowly slipping away from me, and I took an insane course of action to do what I thought would get it back. I am not good at running an organization. I freely admit this. We have no better explanation for Nathan's behavior than any of you, but it is clear to us now that this is simply the most extreme event in a pattern of controlling and dishonest actions that began long before this sequence of events and has created an untenable situation for the workers. For a week, Nathan has insisted to the board that he would be able to continue running Current Affairs profitably, and assisted by a new staff, and promised to write harder than ever before. Since then, he has done an about-face, expressing regret and concern that he has created a situation where Current Affairs cannot continue to exist, and Nathan admits he cannot do the job himself, and the workers he purged are unable to pick up the pieces he so carelessly shattered. But all of Current Affairs' assets are reserved to fulfill the obligations to our subscribers and creditors. The compromise position reached last night is that Current Affairs will take a 1-month hiatus, and all staff, including Nathan and the workers he fired, will be paid through September. We are frankly devastated to lose high esteem for Current Affairs. The left can be as lonely and as vicious as anywhere else on earth, and we love to not just contribute but shape a place of amity, camaraderie, joy, beauty, and truth. We have been able to make people laugh and think, and most importantly, feel less lonely. We have also fully loved working with such talented, curious, and generous artists and writers. We know that this news will devastate people who may be reeling from losses of faith, old and now. This feels like a light going out. If you want to stand in solidarity with us, please consider sharing this, emailing messages of support to past .affairs2021 and adding yourself to our mailing list to hear about any new projects. We thank you so much for your attention and affection over the years. Solidarity, Allegra Silcox, business manager, Light to Gold, managing and amusement editor, Kate Christensen, Gartho, admin assistant, Aisling McCrea, former producer of Current Affairs podcast, and Kate Root, poet at large, formerly administrative maid. Alright, so this right here is such a bad look for Nathan J. Robinson. Because while he could have admitted that he didn't believe that he could he could have came up with so many other excuses to hide and still slightly be able to save face here, because with this being said, he could have just ended the organization altogether, uh, complain about financial issues, and not look like a hypocrite. That's probably the one move he could have made. But now, the reason why he looks so bad here is because instead of practicing what you preach when it comes to socialism, you're effectively deciding not to by just saying that you're going to fire most of your staff, especially those who are advocating for a worker co-op, part of things that should exist under socialism, and instead advocating for the same failed status quo type of structures because you didn't want to give up your authority. And the frustrating part about this is liberals and conservatives alike are having a field day with calling out the hypocrisy from this progressive Nathan Robinson. And when it comes down to it, he has shown so many liberal type of tendencies, especially over the past year. And that's why this is sad to see, because when it comes down to it, workers' co-ops are definitely a step of evolution ahead of, well, employers owning stock. Especially since that's essentially what your imperialist breadtube left advocates for, is, and calls that socialism. And worker co-ops, just for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a workplace structure where everyone, a democratic structure where everyone gets to vote on changes within their company, and the person in charge of the company has essentially the same amount of say as everyone else when it comes to making changes within the workplace. These are things that the great economics professor Richard Wolff advocates for, is stuff like worker co-ops. Also, it's one of the big points that Kamali Rose of the Radical Democracy makes as well. By the way, yeah, after the show, go check out that interview with Kamali Rose. Very good content from him in that interview, as always. So this just goes to show you how bad he looks here, and how, when it comes down to being a true leftist, not, I won't even say true leftist, but being someone who is truly about socialism, Nathan Robinson effectively chose the side of the liberal and of the average conservative business owner effectively making the decision to run his business the same way they do, and effectively undermining your message here. And just another moment where people who are part of the left make the left look bad. So also, please, you should go subscribe to that. Go connect to that mailing list, because I do hope that the people who got discarded by Nathan Robinson will carry out the vision that they wanted and make that true worker co-op. But likely, in order for them to do it, they're going to be reliant on independent support in order to make that happen. Even though not all the decisions in a worker co-op are tied to financials, I do hope that these people will be able to carry out that vision, because we need more and more worker co-ops to pop up throughout this country, in addition to the return of unions. My dad was a union worker for the vast majority of his working life, so I will advocate for the return of unions and worker co-ops, with the exception of police unions. That's the only union that does not need to exist. And how this shines a bad light on the left, because Nathan effectively looks the same as other union busters that we've had in these publications and media outlets. In fact, since I'm about to go into some Barstool, I'm going to bring up that article real quick on Dave Portnoy of Barstool. And it'll be a good way to do a prelude into the pointing out all the instances of Barstool. It's racism, misogyny, and whatnot, which would make it a bad idea for them to come on board with the Major League Baseball. So the article's now up. So just to show you what effectively Nathan Robinson is like, he's exactly like the scumbag Dave Portnoy of Barstool. Barstool sports founder Dave Portnoy threatened to fire on the spot any employee at his blogging company who sought advice on forming a union. The threat, issued over Twitter, brought a rebuke from New York State labor regulators, who reminded Portnoy that federal law prohibits terminating workers for union-related activities. New York Democrat AOC also weighed in, tweeting, "Bosses who threaten to workers for trying to unionize can be sued on the spot." I'm not going to go into to this article, but this is effectively what Nathan Robinson did. And even though he didn't threaten to fire people and do it in the same type of way that Dave Portnoy did, he essentially did the same thing. And what makes it worse is he negotiated with his workers in dialogue over the idea of a worker co-op, then decided to fire the workers, especially the ones who are most vocal about trying to enact a worker co-op, while offering bullshit positions for some who are less vocal, which would give them no power. So I'm not really sure if this institutes the same type of lines of being able to sue Nathan J. Robinson, but to me it sounds worse because, as I said, he got in dialogues of negotiation, but decided he wouldn't allow it to go through and fire it. That is worse than what David Portnoy did, because Portnoy is like your typical Republican. You know where they stand. And Nathan J. Robinson, in typical Democrat form, pretends to be on your side when it comes to advocating for socialism, but when it comes time for him to choose and make a real choice of practicing what you preach, he effectively chose the right. Yeah, that's right. He chose to side with the right. And that's why I hope that no one will take him seriously anymore, because this is really the last straw. Among other things, at least with other issues that the more liberal side of the left can fuck up on, at least there's an easier path to a redemption arc. But after this, there's not much you can do to redeem yourself after this. Because workers need a society that works for them. And if we continue to allow the owner class to rule society, then it's going to make it harder to make progress on reaching a socialist society. And it's worse when it comes from people that you think are on your side, but then stab you in the back.